to How to Plan for Show Success, the first of a two-part webinar series designed specifically for exhibitors of the Restaurants Canada show. At this time, I'd like to introduce our presenter, Barry Siskind, an internationally recognized expert in trade and consumer shows who will lead the webinar. Barry, over to you.
Thanks, Sue. Hi, everybody. So glad you are joining us today, and hopefully you will join us for the next webinar, and I'll give you some information about that later. But today's session is really focused on those of you who are charged with the responsibility of organizing for your organizations, your companies, the Restaurants Canada show, your booth for the show. And so what I'd like to do is to go through some skills now, and you have some time to take what I'm going to show you and actually incorporate it into your plans. I want to go through some basic information that is going to help you do what you really need to do once you get to the Restaurants Canada show. And my focus with you is all about one thing and one thing only, and that's results. I've been in the exhibition business. I've been a consultant helping companies like yours for an awful long time. And over my 3 decades in this business, I have learned that when exhibitors do it right, results can be spectacular. When they don't take shows as seriously as I think they should, then the best you can hope for are lackluster results, and that does not keep your senior management happy. So what are we going to do? Let me just go through the agenda with you. Oh, that's okay. What are we going to do? Here's what I'd like to focus on with you. These are the 6 things. I want to talk about visitors today and who those visitors are, and mostly who you ought to be focusing on. I want to talk to you about getting focused. I'm going to show you a real simple procedure for doing that. We're going to understand a little bit more about who your target is, and I'll give you some tips on how to actually define your target, and even of course, why it's so important that you do that. I want to give you a few tips on how to create a winning booth. Your booth, your physical presence at Restaurants Canada really make a difference. It really matters. And so I want to just give you a few tips on how to make it a little bit more attractive, a little bit more attention-getting. We'll talk about, for those of you who are dealing with multiple brands, I'll give you a few tips on how to deal with that. And where I'd like to end up our discussion is on follow-up. What are you going to do after the show is all over with? Now, in the right-hand corner of your screen, there's a little chat room. And so if there are any questions that come up during my presentation, what I really don't want to do is wait until the end and then go, okay, if you got any questions. If you've got questions that come up along the way, just put them in there. I will see the questions and I will address them as quickly as I possibly can. If I can't get to your question immediately, then I will give you some information later so that you can still get your questions answered offline after the webinar is over with. But so don't just sit back idly. What I want you to do is be very active participants in today's webinar. Let's begin. So let's talk about attendees, visitors to a trade show. They are not the same people who attended a trade show when I first got into this business 25 or 30 years ago. Attendees today are so much different than what they used to be. And so the bottom line, before we even talk about this, is for those of you who are treating attendees the same way perhaps your organization treated people years ago, and you haven't changed and you haven't adjusted, then what you're doing is making a huge mistake. So let's talk about who these attendees are. Attendees today are well informed. These people don't just come to the show because they don't know anything. They've done their homework. They've gone on the internet. All the information they want is on the internet. And the other interesting thing about these people is that they are further along in the decision-making cycle when they finally get to the show. Now those two things are so different from where we used to be. And I just want you to imagine, okay, that you're an attendee who is very well informed. You've done your research, you've done your homework, you've come to the show, you've narrowed down your choice of 1 or 2 vendors who sell competitive products, and you've come to the show and you walk up to a booth person at somebody's booth and this booth person immediately gets into a pitch. You know, they start telling you everything about their product and their service without any regards to what it is that you already know, what it is you need to know. Can you just imagine how you're going to feel when that happens? You're going to realize this pitch has nothing to do with you. This isn't what you want to know. What you want to know is unique to you. So that's something that's really, really different. The other interesting thing about visitors is to answer the question why they come to the shows in the first place. I mean, if they've done all their homework, if they've narrowed down their list of vendors, why on earth do they have to come to Restaurants Canada? Well, the answer is they come for a variety of reasons. These are just a few. One of the things they come to one of the reasons that will motivate them is they come to see what's new products, new services, new applications of old products and services. But they can see what's new on the internet. But what they can't do on the internet is to experience new products and services. And so when I say they come to see what's new, what I really mean to say is that they come to experience it, to touch it, to feel it, to taste it, to smell it, to hear it. They come for education. Your show, just like any other show, is just filled with educational opportunities for visitors who are coming to the show. And they love it if they can have an opportunity to invest a day or two walking the show, but also listening to keynote speakers, to attend concurrent workshops, to learn from exhibitors. That will justify for them what it costs for them to be there. They come to stay up to date. I mean, what a great opportunity to meet all the players and find out what the new developments are and where things are going in the future. They come to network. We got 12,000 people coming to Restaurants Canada, and so for each person that's coming, it gives them a chance to meet and greet and talk to colleagues, peers. They come to compare programs, services, and products. This is you. You see, when they come to Restaurants Canada, you're there, but so is everybody else. And for a visitor, this is fabulous. Think of all the time it saves them. They can see everybody under one roof in one day. They come to maintain or establish relationships. I mean, you know this. You will have a lot of people that you're already selling to, doing business with, who will come to you. And what you really want to do is just to kind of maintain that good relationship you have with that person. They come for the same reason. For a lot of these folks, they don't get to see you all year. But here at Restaurants Canada, they come and they get a chance to talk and they get a chance to meet you eyeball to eyeball. So understanding that these attendees have specific things that they're looking for, and understanding that they have more information at their disposal, and that they are further along in the sales cycle, I want to leave you with this. This is a key strategic question that you should be asking yourself as you are planning the Restaurants Canada booth. And the question is, what can we offer them, the visitors, that complements or goes beyond what they can acquire from the internet? Now that is a really important question. If your booth is designed just to give them the exact same information they get somewhere else, you're missing it. You're missing the opportunity. But if you can take the information, all that knowledge that they are gaining about your products and services and move that one step further, then what you are doing is you are giving them exactly what they want from Restaurants Canada show. So write that one down, okay? Because that is just the key question which will motivate everything in your booth planning, everything. So every time you make a decision, ask yourself, is by me doing this, by me taking this product, by me taking this sign or graphic or booth or these particular sales folks, will that enhance the visitor's experience beyond the knowledge that they're already getting elsewhere? Okay, makes sense so far? Good, okay. So what visitors want now that they didn't want 20 or 30 years ago when I got into this business is, number one, they want that experience. They want to actually try out products and services. They want to taste products. For all of you that are selling food products, you know this already. You can't just have the product beautifully displayed. You've got to give somebody a taste. That's the test drive. So for those of you who are selling products and services, think about, how can I bring my product or service to life and actually allow my visitors an opportunity to experience it with as many of their senses as I possibly can. One of the ways to do that is live demonstrations. Now, this is one of, listen, I travel all over the world, and I get to see trade shows everywhere. And one of the things that people don't do enough, exhibitors don't do enough, is actually do demonstrations. And there's probably a gazillion reasons why they don't. But if you can bring some life to your booth, if you can show people how your product, service works, it's one of the key things that they will remember afterwards. It gets them more involved. Entertainment is another cool thing to include. I mean, you know, you got some serious restaurant folks that are coming to this show, and yes, they're all working and they've got businesses and they've got ROIs and profit margins and all these things to take care of, but they're people. And there's nothing wrong with throwing in the entertainment factor as well. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a couple of minutes. But, you know, if you can get them to smile, if you can get them just to relax a little bit, it makes learning more about your offerings. It makes that whole interaction so much more palatable. The other thing they want is education. That's why they came to the show. I mentioned this to you before, and I'm going to say it again. The show itself has an educational component, but you as an exhibitor can teach people as well. So think about it. When you're putting your booth together, what can I do in my booth to teach people, to educate people, to give them information they can take back to their place of business and actually do better at their own job? And this means more than a product pitch. This means teaching them something. So, the key question, remember the question I said before? Okay, so now the second question, I want you to write this one down. How can the visitor leave the show changed? Remember, we're going to enhance them beyond what they can get in the internet, but now what we want to do is actually change them. Not just inform them with data and facts and figures and details and specifications. How do we actually take this person and change them? And that is such a massive, massive question. And if your booth can address that question effectively, then you are going to be amongst the very few numbers of people who actually come away from this show, and most shows, winning. And I want you all to be able to do that. Okay, so how do we get yourself focused? Well, the answer here is we need to set some really good objectives. Why bother doing that? Well, the answer is most people don't. Most exhibit managers just like you, and you know, in my business, I get to read all the statistics on exhibitor behavior and attendee behavior and that sort of thing. And one of the things that I have learned over the course of my career is that the vast majority of exhibit managers don't set half-decent objectives. You know, they don't know how. You know, perhaps it's not a sales objective, so they don't know what they're, you know, how am I going to do a non-sales objective? They don't have enough time. They're just running the show the same way they did last time. The person was just, you know, the exhibit manager was just handed the file from last year and expected just to replicate what they had been doing in the past. There's a million reasons, but setting objective is the key element to your success. As a matter of fact, here, let me tell you how to succeed at a trade show, okay? I know you're committed for another 45 minutes with me, but I'll give you the bottom line right now, okay? It's the beginning and the end. If you're well focused in the beginning and you've got a really good follow-up in the plan for your follow-up plan later, everything will come into place. All the stuff in the middle will come into place. But without a really clear focus and without knowing what you're going to do after the show is over with, nothing works. So I don't hang up, because that's the bottom line for you. And even though I've given it to you now, I've got more information to pass along to you. So I've got a little exercise I want you to do, and I want you to do this in the next 2 or 3 days. I want you to sit down with your colleagues, your manager, your peers, whoever it happens to be, and I want you to say, look, we're going to Restaurants Canada, okay? And this is step number 1. And when you do, I want you to say, okay, we're going to Restaurants Canada. Here's a little bit about the show. What would What should we achieve at the show? What should our objectives be? And then what I'd like you to do is sit back and listen. And your group that you put together will tell you the most wonderful things. They go, we ought to be able to write some orders. We ought to be able to get some really good quality leads. We ought to be able to get out there and just, meet the people we're already doing business with. We maybe have a chance to meet the media. Maybe we have a chance to sign up some new dealers and representatives. Maybe we have a chance. They can go on and on and on. And all I want you to do is write down everything they're telling you. And if you could just take step one and do nothing else with it and give it enough time, you will find out there's over 100 valid reasons for doing restaurants in Canada. But there's a problem. The problem is this. The more things you try to achieve, the less likely you are to succeed. So even though in step number one you've got a list of 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 different things, you can't have them all. And this is the real trick to doing a show well. So now what I want you to do is take the list of 5 or 6 and ask yourself this question. Here's my 5 or 6 reasons. Which of those 5 or 6 reasons will justify the time and the energy and the resources I'm going to put into that show, into the Restaurants Canada show? Okay, so ask yourself that question and then narrow the list down from 5 or 6 to 1. Okay, maybe 2, but no more. The more you try to achieve, the less likely you are to succeed. Now, this doesn't mean you're excluding anybody. It doesn't mean you're excluding opportunities, but what it means is that all your plans are now focused on one thing and one thing only: results. The results that you and your organization deserve from the investment you're putting into Restaurants Canada. But there's one more step to step number 2, which answers the question, who is your target? Who are you targeting at this show? Now, if I asked some of your booth people who your target is, the question I would go, look, you got 12,000 people coming to Restaurants Canada. Who do you want to talk to? And if they turn around to me and say, well, as many people as I possibly can, I'd say, no. You don't want to talk to all 12,000 of those people. That's not what trade shows are about. It really isn't. I mean, your target, the people who will help you most succeed at the objectives you set, are just a slice of those 12,000 visitors. And I think it's really important at this point in the game to clearly identify who you ought to be focusing with, and that who are those high-value contacts, the people who are most likely going to help you succeed, help you reach those objectives you set. And then what I think you need to do is create a profile. Clearly identify, because once you've got that profile, you can pass it along to your booth staff. You can, every time you do a sign, you do a graphic, you decide what products to bring. All of those decisions become really easy because you're saying to yourself, this is who I'm designing it for. The clearer the profile, the better your focus. So let me just go through a quick little exercise with profile and talk to you about what's involved in doing that. Let me just fix that. Hang on. Sorry, I jumped one thing there. Okay, so let's go here. Here's profile. Okay, so who are the 12,000 industry professionals who are coming? Okay, so what do you already know about the visitors to Restaurants Canada? And you can find this information out on the website, and there's lots more information there. I just pulled a few things off for you. But we know that 77% of the top 100 food service companies in Canada will be represented at Restaurants Canada. 80% of exhibitors return year after year. Now that says something huge to you. It says that obviously this is a place where people are succeeding. 73% of the show attendees are final decision makers. That's important for you to have. 98% of visitors recommend the show to colleagues. Fabulous for you to have. Now this is basic data. What do we know about the visitors? The type of business, table service, bakeries, wholesalers, hotels, caterers, institutions. This all just came right off of your website. And it's all important data for you to have. But the underlying principle is this. You sell to companies, that's true. but you communicate to individuals. And all the data you've got up until this point is company data. What do I do for my company? How big is my company? How many restaurants do we have under our control? How many of this? How many of that? It's all company data. And although you are selling to companies, your profile does not talk about companies. Your profile talks about individuals. That's who you communicate with. So, do you have enough information to paint a real clear picture of who your individual is? Maybe, maybe not. You know, here's some basic stuff to consider when you're creating the picture. And there's 4 tools that people generally work with. One, of course, is just understanding the demographics, which answers the question, who is my customer? This will include things like job title, decision-making ability, you know, the companies they work for, some of the information that you can get off of the Restaurants Canada website. Psychographics answers the question, what do they do? Well, my area, even though my job title is X, my area of responsibility is Y. This is what I do for my organization. Behavioral analysis understands how do they do it? How do we make decisions? Who else is involved in our decision-making process? What kind of time frame is involved in what we do? And the third one is, or the fourth one, sorry, is called causation data. And causation data answers the question, why do they do what they do? The underlying motivation for them doing what they do in order to accomplish their own jobs. And the first 3 are pretty straightforward, but the last one may need some research. Now, what I hope you're getting the message of what I'm suggesting you're doing as you're creating your customer profile is you're going beyond sort of the basics that you have been given and start to look at your customers better. Now, it's very, very easy to do. Very easy to do. One is that all your sales folks on the road, they know your customers personally. So what you ought to be doing is asking them, can you help me identify more who our prime customers are? You can create user groups. You can do online surveys. You can do, you know, I mean, we're lucky to have the internet because it makes doing customer research so incredibly easy and effective in today's marketplace. Some of the questions that I think you need to answer in order to gather some of this causation data, and some of the questions you may want to ask your sales folks to ask when they're out making face-to-face sales calls are these. Number one, what is their current situation? You know, what kind of pain are your customers feeling right now? What are their plans for the future? Where are they going? Where do they see themselves being in 2, 3, 5, 10 years from now, them and their organizations? What are they currently experiencing in terms, we all think about budget, but what about time constraints? You know, time is a huge, huge issue, which sometimes we don't really address because we're focused more on just strictly budget constraints. How much do they already know? Now, that's not only about your products and the competitive products that are, you know, competing with you, but how much do they already know about the situations they're trying to solve? Do they have any existing knowledge about what's going on in their industry, about what some of the new developments are, where the R&D is going? Do they know that? And the last question, and in my opinion, it's probably the most important, are the expectations. What do they expect from you? What do they expect from the products that you are delivering to them? And this goes way beyond generic features and benefits. You know, I'd go way beyond that and make it personal. Everybody that you talk to at the trade show is going to have their own unique expectations. And if your booth staff can understand what those expectations are and meet them, fabulous. If they don't understand what the expectations are and are doing nothing more than just pitching benefits and features, they're going to be missing it. And it is so easy for a visitor to walk out of your booth and walk right into your competitor's booth. Just remember that your competition is across the aisle. It's not there down in the mall or in another city. You're right across the aisle. Okay, so those are just some things for you to consider. Let me just, let's switch topics for a minute. Let me talk a little bit about your physical booth. You know, what works? And there's an organization in the States called CEIR. CEIR is the Center for Exhibition Industry Research. A lot of the data that I use comes from CEIR, and if you want to get more information about the trade show business generally, it's CEIR.org. But 4 or 5 years ago, they came up with this really, really interesting study. And the focus of the study was memorability. What do people remember? When you ask somebody after a show, what do they recall about the various exhibitors that they saw? And what's really interesting is the number one thing they all remember are the big exhibitors. They all remember, and this is one of those situations where size does matter. So they all remember the big exhibitors, but I'm not for 1 minute suggesting that you should all try to be the biggest exhibitors. It's probably not practical in terms of money, but it's probably not even necessary. So if I took size off the table, what else? In descending order, what else do they recall? Well, one is the product. They come because they're looking for a solution. The first thing they remember are the products and services that best met their needs, that best met their expectations. 67% of them said that. Below that, well-known companies. So you see, one of the things we know about a show like Restaurants Canada is it is an amazing place to create brand awareness. Brand about who you are, brand about, you know, what products you represent. Half of the people that will come to you and are impressed by you will come to you, and what they will remember is, yes, I remember seeing so-and-so, this particular company who has a strong brand. The next thing is product demonstrations. Now, this is very close to, you know, understanding brand. So not only will they remember the fact that you are a company that they now know, they also will remember your product and service that you demonstrated. Make sense? See, that's almost neck and neck. A stage, theater presentations. This is big companies like high-tech companies like Apple will use stage and theater presentations. Excuse me. They are difficult to do, to actually execute. They are expensive, but if done well, it is an incredibly powerful thing that people will remember. So I remember going by so-and-so's booth, and they had this great big stage presentation going on. You know, think about if you've ever been to a car show, for example. I'm giving you non-food examples, but if you've ever been to a car show and you see some of the big car companies, they put on these very elaborate stage presentations with singers and dancers, and, you know, and it's all wrapped around introducing, you know, their latest vehicle. I mean, you could do the same thing too. Once again, very expensive to implement, but if it makes sense, 25% of the people will remember that alone. But equally important to that kind of presentation are your booth people. And that's why the next webinar that we're going to do, and I said I would give you some information about that in a couple of minutes, but the next webinar that we're going to do is focused on them. So I would really like to, and I will do this again, is to ask you, to invite you to bring all your sales staff with you to the next webinar that we do. Sit them around the boardroom table, you know, put the conference thing on, and, you know, I will show them how to be the kind of booth people that they need to be. Color and design is important, but let's go down to the last two. This is interesting. Giveaways and samples and literature are at the bottom of the list. How many of you went to a show and just gave out, you know, thousands and thousands of brochures? It's the bottom of the list. People don't care about it anymore. It's interesting. You know, hard copy brochures are just becoming a thing of the past. All those free giveaways, you know, the promotional products, they are very, very helpful if used properly. But, you know, it goes way, way below things like product demonstrations, you know, your brand, your product, way beyond that. So if you're going to focus on something, I'd focus on the upper ones rather than the lower ones. Don't disregard booth personnel, but I would focus that way. So let me just give you a couple of things to consider as you are putting your booth together. okay? And yeah, I mean, we could spend our entire hour just talking about the booth and nothing else, but if I can give you a few pointers, I think that will be of help. So your display, number one, it needs a focus. So what is your focus? The focus comes right back to where we started our time together this morning. The focus is, what is your objective and who are you focusing on? Who are the people that will help you achieve that objective? That's what you focus on. So now that you've got that, now you can answer the questions: which product should I bring? What do my signs and my graphics look like? Where should I be located in the show? What should my booth people talk to people about? I mean, all of that now comes into focus because you have established that focus for your exhibit program. The booth needs to be simple, straightforward, and it needs to be not confusing. And focus is what helps you do that. People will walk by your booth and sometimes just go crazy because you got too much there. They can't cope with it all. It's just information overload. That's not what a good booth is. It really isn't. Focus on something. And if you're not sure what to focus on yet, if you're still wrestling with this same issue, here's my suggestion. Focus on, remember the third reason why the first reason why attendees attend, focus on something new. Take that new product, new service, new something, put it dead center, put lots of signs and graphics around it, let them focus on that. All the rest of the stuff is in the background, let them focus on that. If you're still not sure, that's the answer. You need to think out of the box. So what's the box? Well, the box is, when you rented your space at Restaurants Canada, you got a 10 by 10 box, right? But it's not actually 10 by 10, it's actually 10 by 10 by 8. It's a cube. And Restaurants Canada is just like, you know, any other trade show. There will be some restrictions on what you can do. And so what you want to do is you want to think outside the box without breaking any of the show rules. So what we can do often is, and the simplest way of doing it is to create a booth. And I'm not just talking about the big ones, like you can see the picture of Mexico there. That's kind of a large exhibit. But even if you were in a 10 by 10, what you should think about is, okay, I've got this cube, which is 10 by 10 by 8. Most people who are designing a booth in that cube will design it with right angles. Okay, so we're sort of taking advantage of every square inch that we have in that thing, and so now we've got this boxy look. So what I'm suggesting is, let's think out of the box. And one of the easiest, most cost-effective method of thinking out of the box is by using something different than right angles. Shapes. You see what Mexico has done with those really cool things, just that shapes with the wings, it looks like a bird or something. I mean, that's really cool. Talk to your display house about, doing something with stretched fabric that just give you the opportunity of doing something a little bit different. So when people walk by your booth, they go, yeah, that's really cool. And it caught their attention because you're moving away from the boxy look. Another thing to consider is experience. I've mentioned that a couple of times already. Let me mention it once more. That's what people want. They want to experience your products and services. If all that was involved was them just listening to a pitch, they could watch a television commercial. A trade show is different. Your booth needs to be inviting enough to get them to come in. And then once they're in, they need to be able to touch it, taste it, smell it, hear it, feel it. As many of their five senses as you can appeal to, the stronger is their commitment. So think about, how do we bring our products and services to life? So as I said to you before, tasting, of course, if you have a food product, is the right thing to do. But what if you have a non-food product? The answer here is, in a non-food product, maybe we're going to do a demonstration. And maybe the demonstration means somebody just comes and pulls a switch or touches something, or they get a chance to hold something. I mean, it doesn't have to be rocket science. It just has to give them the opportunity to experience what you're doing with another one of their senses. Remember I mentioned before that handouts were the bottom of the list? Don't fill your booth full of literature. You don't need all this stuff. You're just weighing down people. I mean, have you ever gone home on an airplane with a bag full of literature and you know how much that weighs? It's just too much. So what I would recommend is, you do need some, of course. hours, but not as much as you used to, think you needed. So what I'm suggesting is just have a few handouts, put them in a vertical display rack, not in a horizontal display rack, and these are available from your booth vendors. They'll all have these things. Display them vertically, and don't put a whole bunch there. Just keep them at a minimum. And here, I'll give you a really, really old technique. On the front of them, mark these two words: booth copy. And what you're doing now is forcing people coming to you and saying, hey, this is really cool. I'm really interested in this product. Can I get one of these brochures? And what you're going to say is, absolutely. Leave me your contact information. I'll send you one. Okay, make more sense? Or you can just say, like, if you've got a smartphone, let me download it for you right now. So you have so many more options rather than paper. And paper just takes up too much space. So you don't want to do that. Another tool, and some of these are all your pictures from your show. You see what LG is doing, and obviously LG is in the technology business, but that the video wall on the back, that's motion. Motion is the #1 thing that grabs people's attention as they are coming by your booth. The #1 thing. Isn't that amazing? So, a big video wall like that is really, really interesting. You can do, if you had a 10 by 10 booth, you could do a single video. You could have a product on a turntable. It doesn't have to be rocket science, and it doesn't have to be terribly difficult for you to do, but you got to do something. Something in your booth needs to move other than your booth people. Okay, so just think about what can I do in my booth? And people don't even have to look at your booth when they're walking by. They'll see motion with their peripheral vision. Just remember, a static booth does not have the same drawing power as a booth that has something in it that moves. Now, I just wanted to throw this one in and just to address it, because I know some of you are dealing with this particular problem, and the problem is that as a distributor, you're dealing with multiple brands. So what can you do? And the answer is, one of the many answers is put the multiple brands under one theme. As people come by, yes, they'll, there's brand recognition from each one of your brands, but if there's too much there, it's just adding to the confusion of the show that they're already experiencing. So my suggestion is take all your brands, create a theme for your booth, and put them all under one brand. The old diner that we see here for, Coke and Minute Maid, that's the single theme that ties all of your brands together. Now, your brands do have a single theme, or else you wouldn't be having as many as you do, or the diversity. So what is the theme? Can you build a booth come by? And if people feel welcome, then the chance of them crossing that invisible line and coming into your booth is that much greater. If they feel threatened, okay, then they won't. And it's as easy as that. Some of it has to do with the physical layout of the booth, getting rid of the stuff at the front, allowing people entry, making it interesting once they enter, allowing people to have the experience once they enter. And the other part has to do with your sales folks. So I'll just give you a preview of what I'm going to tell you in 3 weeks from now. But, you want to make sure your sales folks look inviting. Remember, get rid of that hungry look. You want to make sure they're not busy chatting with each other. Have you ever seen that one? You ever watch by somebody's booth and you see like 3 or 4 of them having this little discussion amongst each other, this exhibitor huddle where it becomes so intimidating for a visitor to come by and break up that conversation that a lot of them just simply won't. I mean, the reason we're going to do this second seminar in a couple of weeks from now is that all your planning, all of the stuff that you're due, all the investment you're going to make in the Restaurants Canada show, all of it is a waste of time unless your booth people know what they're doing. That's how important that is. So I want you to think about welcoming. Welcoming in terms of perhaps hospitality, welcoming in terms of a nice, easy booth to navigate, welcoming in terms of the people who are actually inviting people in. The other thing is to tell your story with fewer words. Attending visitors don't have enough time to read everything, you know, and I'm sure you've seen this as I have. You've walked by people's booths and they got tons and tons of stuff written on the walls. Here's a list of all our different brands. Here's all our different products. Here's the people we use it. Here's our story. Like, who cares? You do, obviously, but the visitors just simply don't. That's stuff that goes on a website. That's stuff that goes, you know, in your Facebook program or whatever social media program you've got. That's the stuff that goes there. But you see this example of Echo Lab? Their story was told in 3 words. Can you tell your story in 3 words? Think about it. If you can't, do it. You actually have a little bit more than that to work with. You can work with 7, all right? But any more than 7, and visitors just really don't spend the time. They'll come to you if they know who you are and they're already established. But my guess is part of your reason for being at Restaurants Canada is to get some new business, some new contacts. And they're walking up and down the aisles. They've had, you know, they've gone to some of the educational sessions. They've met a lot of other people at the show, a lot of other exhibitors, and their brain are just overloaded with information. And if they walk by your booth and are confused, they'll keep on walking. If they walk by and there's one simple message, a story with as few as words as possible, they can read quickly and it resonates with them, chances are they will actually come in and chat with you. The other thing I want to mention is lighting. You all need lighting. Lighting creates tremendous impact. Tremendous impact. And you can use lighting to sort of, you know, define your entire booth space. You can also use lighting to focus visitors' attention on specific areas, you know, on a particular product or something on a turntable or a sign or a graphic or something. But do use lighting, okay? And quite frankly, whether you've got a big booth or a little booth, doesn't matter. You do need to have some lighting there. So those are a few things for you to consider in terms of, you know, as you're planning and organizing your booth now, those are some of the things that I want you to consider adding to your booth program. Basic stuff, but it makes a huge difference because you have to remember that these visitors, the folks that are coming by your show, if they already know who you are, you're a well-known company, that's fine. But if you're trying to get some new business, folks you haven't done business with before, you're going to need to work your way through the clutter. And the clutter I'm talking about is the marketing clutter. Too much information that these people are trying to absorb all at one time, and they simply can't. Okay, let's do something else. Okay, let me talk a little bit about promotion. And our timing is really good for this because you've got some time now to start promoting your presence at Restaurants Canada. Do not, under any circumstances, build a booth and do no pre-show promotion and show up at the show hoping to get people to come by. Do not do that. That's called a field of dreams. You know, build it and they will come. Some people will, a lot of people won't. So what I'm suggesting we do now is we reach out to people. You reach out to the attendees, the 12,000, well, not the 12,000, but the percentage of those 12,000 who you're focusing on. Reach out to them and get them to come by your booth. Get them to actually put you on their A-list. Want to hear something really interesting? 73% of today's trade show visitors, 73%, that's 3/4 of them, attend with an agenda. That interesting? That's huge. They're not just there kicking tires. They've already thought about what they want to see, what products they're looking for, and all that stuff. So what you need to do is to get on that A-list, and how you do it is through pre-show promotion. Now, the Restaurants Canada show has 3 opportunities available to you. This is not the only things that you should be doing because you should be doing some of your own initiatives, but these 3 are there for you. And I really want you to take full advantage of them. Number 1 is there's a weekly e-news program. Now, you can see the deadlines, okay? And this is blasted out to all the attendees and all the Restaurant Canada members. And it goes weekly. So you still have, you have time for the 1, 2, 3, 4. The 4 different submission deadlines are there for you. You've got time to be there. Costs you nothing to do this. Take advantage of it. Social media is huge. January 3rd is coming very quickly, but you still have time to get involved in their social media program, as well as the on-site app. Now, the on-site app is an interactive app that visitors can actually download onto their iPhone. And once again, you have a submission date for that as well. I mean, take advantage of it. I mean, your show has gone to great extents to help you do the pre-show promotion. But, you know, so take advantage of what's already there for you. But in addition to that, what I would do is go on out, identify who your customer is. Remember, that's that target. And get out there and have your sales folks, when they're making calls, remind people, invite them to the booth, send out invitations, do your own social media program, do your own email blast. You know, get out there and don't just do it once. Okay? The trick is do it lots, because what you want to do is you want to make your presence at Restaurants Canada so important in their minds, they're being the visitors, they can't avoid to ignore you. They have to come by. So what that also means is you don't keep saying the same message over and over and over again. You keep adding to the message. You know, like each, you go back up to the e-news program, don't tell them everything on the first date. Tell them something on the first date, something else on the second date, something else on the third date. Like, build some suspense. Build some suspense. Pre-show promotion is amazing, and you really have to do it. You really have to do it. It's something there. Okay, so I see in the chat room there are some sound problems. I hope that you're still hearing what I have to say, because I want to talk to you a little bit about follow-up. What are you going to do after the show? And I know some of you are actually taking orders at the show, and that's fine. But a lot of people, a lot of visitors will leave writing orders, doing the actual business until later. And so one of the big mistakes that a lot of companies like yours make is not taking advantage of the fact that somebody is here and being proactive with them after the show. Don't wait for them to call you. You call them. If somebody has met you, you've made a good impression with them at the show, what I want you to do is get out there and you call them, you get in contact with them. But how are you going to do that? So what I'd like to do is let me just give you a quick overview. This is something that I've passed along to many colleagues or many clients, and they've used this very successfully. Your very first response after the show ought to take place on the next business day after the show is over with. That's your first response. Now you're probably going, oh my God, how do I have time to do that? And the answer is you probably don't. You're spending so much time and energy putting this thing together. Then you're at the show, which means you're away from the office for a while. And now the show is over with and you come back. Okay, so you know, where do you have time to do this? Well, the answer is, what I'd like to suggest is your first contact be something relatively simple. And your first contact with the customer is not necessarily a phone call, although it could be, or an email. But what I'd like to do is just to let the customer know they haven't been forgotten and what's next. So how do you do that? Well, what I'm going to suggest you do is now I'm going to take all those contacts you've made at the show and come up with some different categories for them. Now, you make up the category that makes the most amount of sense for you, but the categories will include things like, you know, hot prospects, long-term prospects, medium-range prospects, existing customers looking for new products. I don't know. You know, you make up the categories. Then your very first response ought to be customized to that particular category. Okay, so what's the fastest, easiest way? The answer here is you just write them a letter. Well, how are we going to send them the letter? The answer is email, direct mail, I mean anything. And one of the interesting things you should think about is if you're going to send them a letter the next day, what is the most effective way of sending that letter? And the answer is ask them. You know, when you're gathering contact information, and I'll show your booth folks how to do this in a couple of weeks from now, but I want you to add one more field in your data management program, and the field is preferred method of communication. So ask them, Okay, like what's the best way for me to get in touch with you and stay in touch with you? Well, don't send me an email because we've got filters and we'll never read it. I prefer just getting hard mail. Fine, send it to them by hard mail. If they say don't send me hard mail because I'll never do it, don't. Ask them and customize your follow-up. So now you've got 3 or 4 different letters, and each letter is telling the person, thanking them for being part of the program and actually coming to see your booth at Restaurants Canada. And here's what's next. Dear existing customer, thank you so much for dropping by your booth. You've asked for additional information, and I passed your information along to your area representative, who will be in touch with you by the 20th. See, you said, thanks for coming by. Here's what's next. Dear so-and-so, thanks for coming by our booth. We're putting together that proposal we promised you, and our internal folks say that it should be ready on the 12th. We will get it out to you immediately. If you need anything before that, please let me know. Thanks for coming by. Here's what's next. You see, and when you make those promises, you will have arranged ahead of time how to fulfill those promises. Go to your folks, go to your reps, say, look, if I give you some people who need to talk to you, when can you get back to them? And you better make sure you do, because I'm going to tell them you will by that date. Okay, so you get it all organized so that first response goes out. Next thing you need in order to do that is dedicated physical space. I mean, actually think about it. If your actual sales folks are going to do this first response, then they have their space. If you're going to do it as an administrative function, then what you need to do is actually put aside a desk, a computer, all of these letters written on them, and then get someone to do it. And even if you have nobody internally, go hire somebody for a day. I mean, get a student who will come and just do fulfillment letters. I mean, it's not costly, and whatever it costs is going to be one of your best investments in the Restaurant Canada show. You need contact information technology. Now, there are a multiple number of different systems available. There are electronic systems, there are smartphone card readers, there are manual systems. And I'll go through some of those next week when we talk again, but you really need to think about what works best for you. What kind of system is available for me that allows me to record this contact information immediately. I can't wait till later. Records it right now, immediately. Okay, and so then you need to make sure that your booth staff is trained, that they know and understand how to do it. Okay? Okay. Last one on my list says you got to fulfill your promises. Any promise you made, you got to stick with it. And the answer to this one is, if I promise to have my rep come by and make a further presentation on the 12th, and for some reason that rep can't, that rep has to get back to me and say, listen, I can't meet this person on the 12th, and I will get back to this person as well and copy the rep and say, sorry, we just can't do it on the 12th, but he's promised to be on the 13th. Is that okay? I can't have the proposal on the 20th. We will have it by the 22nd. Is that okay? And all you're doing by all of this is staying in touch and letting them know what's next. Now, why do we bother with this? And the answer is really simple. When you look at the statistics of how leads, good show contacts are followed up, you will realize how dismal the results are. Nearly 80% of the people, 80% of the leads that are generated at a show like Restaurants Canada are abused, are misused, are mishandled. And if you don't believe me, walk around the show yourself. Go talk to some people. Ask them some questions. Ask them to get back to you with some information. And you will be astonished at what happens. What will happen, if they're typical, is 18% of all the people who made a promise to you will never get back to you at all. Isn't that interesting? You wonder, where did the lead go? Well, they got busy. They got back. They lost the piece of paper. They got busy. They were doing a bunch of other things. Nearly 40% of all those leads will be followed up too late. A month later, 2 months later. Think about it. I'm a visitor. I came to your show. I've got solutions that I'm looking for that my business needs in order to grow, and you get back to me a month later? Give me a break. I'm going to bought from somebody else or have a brand new problem, and your solution is no longer relevant to me. You got to get to them fast, and if you don't have enough time to make proper sales calls and do all of what you need to do immediately after the show, which you won't, then at least Stay in touch with them. Let them know what's next. And that makes the world of difference. So there we go. Just a couple of things, and then I'm going to wrap this thing up. So I would like to invite you to join me at Restaurants Canada once again on November the 17th at 11 p.m. You will receive an invitation and all of that with the login numbers. But what I'd like to ask you to do is to bring with you all your exhibit personnel. Sit them around a boardroom table and we're going to chat just like we did today. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to teach them the skills that they need to work a booth properly. And I even want you to bring those folks who have been coming to the show for years, and they're going to tell you, I know everything about the show, I know how to work the show, because those are the people that scare me the most. If they haven't changed the way they're reacting to people at the show, knowing full well that visitors at a show are a whole new breed of people, then your sales folks are making a huge mistake. I'm going to focus on some stuff. What I'm going to show them is how to actually get out there and proactively approach strangers, not as a salesperson, but projecting that right image, that welcoming image. How do we do that? It's a matter of attitude, and I'm going to show them how to do that. I'm going to show you how to uncover visitors' need in about 90 seconds flat. It'll take me a little more to do that, but more time to do that, but your sales folks are going to be able to do it in 90 seconds flat. We're going to talk to them about recording information. Whatever system you have chosen to work with, I will reinforce that for you and for them on November the 17th. We're going to talk about how to take notes. We're going to talk about when to take notes. Okay, and I'll do all of that for you then. We're going to talk a little bit about making a presentation. What kind of information do I give people? You know, what we've talked about today is visitors come to the show and they are overloaded with information. So the more stuff you tell them at the booth, less they're going to remember anyway. So what do we tell them? We got to tell them something. I'm going to show you. The last thing I want to talk to them about on the 17th is how do you get out of a conversation? What happens once the conversation is over with? And the answer is clear. You need to break it off. And this is one of the hardest things for people to do, particular sales folks. You're into a nice conversation with somebody. And your objectives are met. You've already met your objective. You've passed along whatever information is appropriate, and the visitor wants to keep on talking. What do? I'm going to show you. I'll show you how to do that. So I want you to mark in your calendar, February the 17th at 11 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, and we will talk once again with all of your sales folks, and I will show them how to get the most out of Restaurants Canada and how all of the work that you're going to put into the development of your presence at Restaurants Canada will now move towards real results. They're the ones that are going to make it happen, not you. So bring them along on that day. Now, I do apologize because we had a ton of things to talk about today, so I wasn't able to get to all the questions. But if you have any other questions or anything about planning and organizing and all that kind of stuff, there's my email address. So I would like to invite you to just stay in touch with me and let me know if there's any questions about your planning and organizing that I can help you with, or your staff or whatever, and I will get back to you with answers as quickly as I possibly can. So that's our time. I want to thank you guys for being part of today's program. This is recorded, so it will be archived on the Restaurants Canada site. So if you want to hear it again, or if you want to tell some of your colleagues about it, please do. Once again, please join me on February 17th. And thanks so much for being part of our webinar.